All right, welcome to Patrick's Favorite Lenses, and it should be no surprise to any of you that they're all G Masters. So the 135 1.8 G Master lens is the sharpest lens I have ever used in my entire lifetime, and that includes shooting Leica M in the 80s and the 90s, all the Hasselblad stuff. I shot the GX680 system by Fuji. I've shot everything Nikon and Canon has ever had in recent memory. Nothing comes close to what the 135 1.8 GM does. I use it for sports, portraits, weddings, corporate, nature, and anything else I can think of because I love to take it with me, take it out of my bag, and just shoot it. It's amazing. I even use it on assignments when I know the client won't use the pictures from it, but I just want to see them afterwards in post. I think the 135 GM is about as close to a flawless lens as is possible to get. It does everything perfectly for me. It's replaced my need for a long zoom. I think I got this lens and I owned it for about 9 months when I realized I hadn't touched my 7200 2.8 in all that time. So I pretty much am happy to give up the versatility of a zoom in order to use this instead all the time. Of course, I retasked the focus hold button on all my lenses to allow me to punch in to the 1.5x zoom on sensor, and that leaves me with a 21 megapixel file with the Alpha 1. So a 135 times 1.5x is a 202 millimeter 1.8 21 megapixel file. That's astounding. This is a picture I shot for a billboard for a small college that was trying to sell football tickets. And as you can see, this is the 135, and I'm in full autofocus. And even though this guy's full frame, this is like literally the width of the frame. It's achieving eye autofocus through the face mask on the helmet. It's just tremendous. So this guy is jumping into high jump pads in the end zone of his football field, and of course, I've got him lit. This is high-speed sync. I think it's about 0.003 of a second or something like that to stop him. But you can see how narrow the depth of field is. His fingertips are out of focus. His shoes are way out of focus. It's just his face and where the ball is. That's the same plane, which is sharp. I love to use the 135 G Master on portraits, family portraits, senior pictures, professional portraits for corporate, whatever. The only complaint I've ever had about it is it might be too sharp, and sometimes you have to kind of dumb it down in post because not everybody wants to see every single imperfection of their face. This is another lit setup. I'm using Elenchromes to freeze the action here, but I use the 135. Now, he is jumping in darkness, total darkness. So it's incredible. I shouldn't say total. There's some window light behind him, but the camera's able to track even in darkness and keep him in focus as he's flying through the air and the strobes trip. Alpha 1 is an amazing, amazing camera for portrait work. It will never let you down in terms of focus. The retouching that is needed now is greater, not because it's a 50 megapixel file, but because it sees split ends and dandruff and literally blood vessels in the eyes. This is shot with a 135 1.8 G Master through the glass. We don't have holes in our hockey arena here, so you kind of have to put up with what you got. And even getting something like this through nasty, dirty glass is pretty impressive. Again, it's what I reach for first for portraits every time. It may be a little short for this purpose, but I tell you, I really like using the 135 1.8 G Master for end zone pictures and maybe on goal at soccer. It's just long enough and fast enough to knock the backgrounds out of focus, even when people are, maybe 30 meters away. It's really, really cool. So I take this lens on assignments that probably most people wouldn't, but I just love to shoot it because it's so sharp. It's fun to look at the pictures. My next one is the 24-1.4 G Master. I love this little lens. It's tiny, it's small, it's lightweight. I own the counterpart in Canon and Nikon, and this thing is so small. It's a 67 millimeter filter. It's an easy lens to carry around in the bag all the time, even if you never use it. You should never go anywhere on any assignment without a wide-angle lens because you never know when you need it. And the fact that it's got the linear motor in it just like the big G Master glass does, is phenomenal. So I really, really like shooting this lens a lot. Here's a portrait of somebody COVID living, basically a homeless person, and kind of a sad story, but her eyes are tack sharp, and the window behind her is out of focus because I'm at 1.4, even though it's wide angle. I shoot a lot of basketball with super wides on remotes. This is a floor remote looking up at the hoop, and the 24 G Master is a great lens for this. This is a COVID portrait of a high school senior that didn't get to graduate, and so we shot the picture in her empty parking lot at her high school, and it really kind of tells the story. I also like that the G Master doesn't bend people up too much. Here's a great example of that. You wouldn't think about getting this close to someone with a 24mm lens in a portrait, but it really works, and I really like it. There's a little bit of distortion, but I think it's easily acceptable. And look at the background. I mean, to be able to get this close and then show the entire environment is really cool. Then comes the 600 f4. I love this lens. Oh, this lens and I have a relationship. I much prefer the 6 over the 4. And it just gives me the best combination of autofocus speed, sharpness, but most important, the backgrounds are completely blown out. Even when I'm really, really far away from the subject. Like if I'm way downfield, it still blows the backgrounds out behind my subjects. I find adding the 1.4x to the 600 gives me a great reach to see into the action on the other side of the field that people don't even see and know is there because they're just too loose, especially in American football. Adding the A1 to the back of a 600 GM brings about a new experience in terms of a radical acquire and tracking. A1 plus the 600 GM is unstoppable, and if you do the punch in by using the ring on the focus ring, 600 millimeters times 1.5 is 900 millimeter f4, and you still have a 21 megapixel file that you can crop from there if you need it. The balance of the big two are really different than any other long glass I've ever used in my life. Because they put most of the heavy elements of glass in the center and the rear of the lens, they're weighted completely differently, and it's just much easier to deal with and move around. They're much easier to travel with and shoot with, and of course they're both incredibly lightweight too, which is very nice. Being able to punch in at 1.5x on the sensor anytime while shooting is a huge benefit. And you can either do that with the focus hold buttons or with the big ring. The 400-2.8 becomes a 600-2.8. The 604 becomes a 900 millimeter 4. And of course, I'm talking about field of view, not actual focal length. But just by the flick of that spring-loaded ring or pressing a focus hold button, I have a whole new perspective in the camera. The 600 just makes everything look like eye candy. To look into the melee, the craziness of a whitewater kayaker in a big raging class 4 rapid, and know that it's ignoring all the spray in the water and only going for eye sharp. It's otherworldly to be able to use this lens, honestly. Again, if you get your shutter speed up nice and high with football, you can really capture some beautiful headings. If they're hot and sweaty, you get all this water coming off the head. It's cool. This is an image I shot just a couple weeks ago on an assignment, and I just love how I'm probably 70, 80 meters away from this play, and the players on the bench behind this play are probably only 30, maybe 20 meters behind them, and yet the 600 f4 can see through the referee to the two that I want and still make a fuzzball out of the players behind. And this is the gift of, this is what a 400-2.8 cannot do with a 1.4 converter on it. It just wouldn't work out this nicely. So just remember, the 600 f4, it always trumps the 400 for image quality when you want blown out backgrounds. Here's just a little moment that was missed by the referee, of course. No yellow card ensued. This is 1600 ISO. It looks like a 100 ISO. It's amazing what a 600 can do with a complicated background. This is a chain link fence and a track in the background and all that, and it just turns into butter. It just turns into nothing. It's beautiful. This is 600 f4 with a 1.4 converter attached, and this is how I shoot a lot of American football. I really, really love this combination, and I also like shooting landscape as opposed to portrait. It just helps me track action easier, and I just really enjoy this combination. So the 400-2.8 is my number 2 lens that I reach for. It's not my first choice, but it's so versatile, you have to have one. I could shoot down-court basketball, indoor tennis in really dark situations, hockey, high school football, auto racing, and tons of other things with it. I still prefer the 600 G Master, but I can't use it for everything. Not so much the f4 part, but because it's just too long. The 6 and the 4 are both so lightweight that I can carry either one of them in a backpack all day long and not get tired. And with teleconverters that are very sharp, the 1.4 and the 2X are excellent. I can get a 560 millimeter field of view or an 800 5.6 field of view with either of the teleconverters. But if I add the 1.5x punch in, where you zoom in the sensor, you can get these combinations: 600 2.8, 840 f4, and finally 1200 5.6. It's pretty cool. Nadal is fantastic to shoot. I love shooting this man. I could shoot him every day. And virtually every time he hits the ball, he knocks the fuzz off of it. It's just incredible. And using tracking autofocus with an A9 in this case, and then also the incredible linear motor, doing IAF and tracking autofocus, I just love it. This is a stadium that I wanted to go to specifically because it's got the worst flicker you can possibly imagine. Massive changes frame to frame of color balance. And it's just awesome. I went in there with the A9 II for the very first time in a 400-2.8 and made these beautiful pictures. And the sports information director afterwards called me and said, "How did you get these? We've never seen good pictures like this." And that's the kind of call you want to get from clients. Yep, 400-2.8. Even the number 8 is out of focus, but his face is sharp. Unbelievable. This is 20,000 ISO, and it's just, there's so little noise in this. It's incredible. The 400-2.8 and the A9 II have been a great combo for me, but I'm happy to trade that in for Alpha 1 and the 400-2.8. Again, the U.S. Open is just a fantastic venue. The lighting is excellent. It's open to the sky, and the morning sessions are just phenomenal. This is actually an evening session, but it looks like daytime. But getting the reaction and blowing the background out of the crowds, it's just awesome. Every once in a while, I'll get lucky. The IAF never ceases to amaze me how it can pierce through all that complicated face mask and the mouthpieces and everything else, and it can still find the eyes. It's just incredible to me how that does that. And look at that background, how it's just completely blown out of nothing. This is my sort of fingertip throws with the quarterback. This is my little thing. I love getting this moment, and I can get it over and over and over again at 30 frames per second, and the G Master glass. You can hand hold a 400-2.8 easily for basketball, as I did here. This is a coach who's really angry, but it's so sharp. And the great thing is it's going to do IAF, and you can compose on the fly and not worry about him being in the center of the frame like you used to with DSLRs. It's great. I'm ending with this one, the 50mm 1.2 G Master, which was just announced, I guess about a week ago. I obviously don't have any images to show from this lens yet because I haven't shot one, but I'm confident it will be one of my favorite lenses as well. And I'm so excited. They can't ship them fast enough. I will use this lens for environmental portraits, and I will use it for basketball when I'm not using strobes. Definitely for volleyball, wrestling, and especially karate and judo competitions, which are often held in really, really dark venues. And you need super high shutter speeds to capture karate and judo. And this lens will let me do that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Also, the new 50 GM will become a 75mm 1.2 and have a 21 megapixel field of view. So that's big. I wanted to talk briefly about the FD linear motors and the floating focus mechanism, because it's just incredible. It gives you, this is the 51.2, the new lens. It just gives you this amazing ability to be flawless. And being flawless is awesome, and being flawless at 30 frames per second is insane. And so all the lenses that I've chosen are all basically able to do this because of the motors and because of the Alpha 1. So for me, my favorite lenses are always going to be, they're always going to have linear motors in them, and they're always going to be, used with the Alpha 1 for this purpose. Just look at this. This is a giveaway video from Sony, but it still shows how unbelievably perfect the autofocus is, even at 1.2. Breathtaking. So the XD linear motors, they offer this ultra-fast depth of field focusing, which is hard for lenses to do, and then real-time tracking, and then totally quiet autofocus. It's the answer for a lot of problems. Sony's linear AF motors make the AF magic happen at breakneck speeds. And it's interesting to me that I wanted to talk about this briefly, the 51.2 is amazing because it has not one but two of these motor sets. So there's technically 4 different XD linear AF motors in the 51.2. And the reason for this is simple, that every time you focus the lens to a new distance, in order to achieve edge-to-edge sharpness, the rear element also realigns itself. So no matter where you're focused at, the lens is giving you optimum performance edge-to-edge in a flat field no matter what. And that is phenomenal. I'm really, really excited. I can't wait to shoot this lens. And there you have it. Those are my most favorite lenses, the 24 G Master, what will soon be the 50 G Master, the 135 G Master, which is my favorite lens of all time, the 400 G Master, and the 600 G Master. And notice how all these kind of roughly double as you move through them. So 24 times 2 would be 48, 50 millimeter. I go a little bit longer on the 135, but that's okay. And then I jump to the 400 and the 600. And the only thing that's missing that I wish I had is a 300-2.8 or a 300 f4. And I'm confident that Sony will be kind of hoping to satisfy me in 2021 on that account. That's my hope.